This is James Fox, and you're listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. My name is Andy, and this is your listener Ramble, back after a couple of weeks away, where it's been non-stop guests, as you have probably seen on the feed. Thanks to everyone who's reached out and contributed so far to the Rambles. Please keep sending over your emails if you want to get involved in the call-in, or if you want me to read out the email to ufouapam@gmail.com. This show, I'm going to focus on a couple of listener calls, which you're going to hear soon, but start off with some of your thoughts and opinions on Skywatcher. So Skywatcher is the organisation, of course, brought forward from Jake Barber, whistleblower, that came out on News Nation with Ross Coulthart and some other folks. So far, what we've got is a website, and the website is more or less a contact form. If you go to Skywatcher.ai, you go on there and it's got a nice little background, some starry sky, and it says just look up, stay in the know. You can put your email, and they're looking for what you can provide to help and volunteer services to the organisation. So if anyone does have any particular skills, editing, camera equipment, that kind of stuff, they want folks to get in touch with them. I believe the proper website is being designed by Lester Nari, who is really good with that kind of stuff at the moment. Right now, they've got a 30-minute promo video as well, and that's available on X and other socials to watch. I suggest people check that one out. It's got Alex Clokus from Salt Conference, who is involved in this as well. They want to host, from some of their posts they've put up on social media, they're looking to host an experimental Skywatcher event, which is quite interesting. Now, what's again, very interesting and speaks to social media. When Skywatcher posted this on their account, a lot of folks jumped in to say, here we go, selling tickets for stuff. They're not selling tickets for anything. Not at the moment anyway, that I can see. They have said it's an event for 50 to 100 people. They wanted folks to fill in a form to basically express their interest. It will be a free event from what it looks like as well. In the US only, and they're looking for it to be between March and May. And then separately, they've posted on the 16th of February a Skywatcher Part 2, the data. And I'm going to read that out for you. So this is where they're at right now. The Skywatcher team has been hard at work over the last month, and we feel very confident in our recent progress. Skywatcher Part 2 will focus on exactly what everyone wants: data. Our release will involve 3 components: a video interview and analysis of new UAP data, including multiple videos captured by the Skywatcher team, and an elaboration on our data collection and analysis strategy moving forward. No, this is not cell phone footage. So that's quite important. They've mentioned that a few times about the quality of data they will be providing. Number 2, a proposed stages of disclosure framework compiled by our team of advisors that we can collectively use to reference and gauge progress based on existing and future releases. Number 3, an independent analysis of the full dataset conducted by a qualified third party. We are currently open to proposals and suggestions for groups to work with to conduct this analysis. Please DM us if you have a qualified lead or suggestion. Our objective is to complete all 3 of these components in the next 4 to 6 weeks, so you're looking by end of March there. This plan is subject to change, but this is our target. Skywatcher's mission remains the same: take a scientific approach to validating or invalidating the supposed claims related to UAPs. So many of you have reached out to assist, and we are doing our best to scale and expand our operations. We do need your help. This is a community effort, and we are still at the very beginning. We will have many more opportunities where we will need your support and assistance, and we appreciate everyone chiming in. Much more to come. So yeah, right now there's not a lot more than that. I'm hopeful that something comes of this. What I'll do is I'll kind of share my thoughts as I go through your listener thoughts and queries. Thanks to everyone who posted these up on Patreon and YouTube, folks. So let's get through some of the comments. And I remember, folks, over at Patreon, you get a free trial if you want to sign up and support the podcast on all the kind of platforms. You'll get early access, no adverts, and bonus content as well. Same with Apple, so please check those out. Or if you just want to sign straight up, Spotify Premium, type that UFO Podcast Premium, and same on YouTube. But anyway, let's get to the good stuff that you're talking about. So David Brown says, I'd love to know how this group plans on dealing with all the potential outcomes of their contact attempts. I have a million questions. For example, If they bring down a craft, what do they plan on doing with it? Where does it go from there? Do they own it? What happens if the government shows up? What happens if they fail to make contact? Will they be able to provide better data with their equipment? Will they be sharing everything, or will we, the public, only get access to edited information they gather? I'm definitely excited for their work, but I also would love to know if they're bringing any objective observers like a Gary Nolan to help vet what they're doing. Good shout, David. Yeah, and you've got some really interesting questions in there. So I think when I'm thinking about Skywatcher, really the first question is going to be, can they replicate this summoning of a craft? And we're going to just call it a craft for the minute, okay? Because this is something that I discussed with Diana Pasulka. So they either manage to or they don't. And if they don't, that leads to questions around authenticity, etc., which may or may not be fair. It could be around just the setup and whether any phenomenon wants to be contacted in that kind of setting, which, you know, is going to raise questions and red flags for a lot of folks. But let's just go with they do manage to summon whatever these things are. That's a good question. Maybe they can't bring it all the way down. Maybe they can just get it to appear. Maybe it's not even physically there. Maybe it's just a light. I don't know. And there have been some folks, you mentioned Gary Nolan, and others who have been wary of what is being summoned. And then, of course, the idea that they would potentially look to bring one of these things down, however, and perhaps that's not a good idea. When I spoke to Diana Pasulka, Diana mentioned that maybe these things we're summoning aren't craft. I think the way I worded the question to her was, is this akin to people using a Ouija board or other method of contacting, you know, a spirit on the, you know, or the afterlife or whatever that may be, and instead you're summoning something, but do you really know what you're summoning? This literally isn't like picking up a phone and, you know, calling ET to phone home. You don't really know what you're dealing with here, or at least we don't think we do, and that's maybe something Skywatcher, if they do know more, could elaborate on. So yeah, good shout with that one, David, but it does lead to a lot of questions, yeah. Lindsay says, I've got one for you, Andy, one from one analogy lover to another. I recently watched Tron Legacy with my 4-year-old son, who loves the music and action sequences of the film. There's a scene where Jeff Bridges' character, Kevin Flynn, is explaining to his son that Clue was the responsible one for sending the page that brought him to the grid. This is all his design. This is a quote, sorry. This is all his design. He wanted a new piece on the board to change the game. Clue and Kevin Flynn had reached a stalemate situation, much like the stalemate between disclosure advocates and the gatekeepers of the programmes. The Skywatcher group is like Sam Flynn, a new piece on the board that will hopefully change the game. They could potentially act as an end run around the labyrinth of information, disinformation, and social manipulation that has been built up around the years around the UEP topic. They might be able to provide the independent proof that could tip the balance of public consensus or perception past the breaking point and secure the path to Big D disclosure. It does feel like wishful thinking, but when I listen to Jake Barber, when I watch and study him, he has my faith. I think he's the real deal, and I'd get behind him any day. Red team baby, I hope he doesn't prove me wrong. Lindsay, again, do you know what? I read that because you seem really hopeful with this, and there are folks on both sides of this fence. And that's fair enough that perhaps Skywatcher is out the blue, and really Jake Barber and co have come out the blue with this group and hope to do big things in a big way. And I feel one way or another, in a very short period of time, Skywatcher will deliver or will disappear into the ether, because what they're looking to do is very tangible. And it's scientific. They're going to repeat experiments, hopefully, summon something and show us data, so they're making a lot of the right moves and promises. So I would say I'm happy to hold my hands up and go, let's see what happens. But I think they are a group, an organisation that can and probably need to provide something with potential really quickly. So yeah. Joni for Ash says, I still feel too naive on this topic to have any idea what might happen. That's very fair. Algo says, I think Skywatcher can be a game changer because it puts the tools of NHI contact from the hands of the deep state into the hands of the people. They can still fail, get bought or be sabotaged, but I cheer for them. Go Skywatcher. All very fair. There's nothing to say with any organisation, individual or group that they can't be got into narratives change or what they plan to do becomes difficult or different for whatever reason down the line. I think that's just life. Stephen, again, this is still over on the Patreon, folks. Stephen says, it's a test of whether you can buy disclosure. They have the private money behind them to attempt a crash retrieval or something similar outside of the legacy programme. It's also a test of whether the phenomenon will make the distinction between the official legacy programme and this private group and will allow any significant results to emerge. It's worth noting that this isn't being done entirely independently of government. Barbara has said they are doing this with the knowledge and cooperation of government agencies. I'll just caveat there. I think part of that is to do with the locations of where they may be operating, to be fair. But still raises questions and still, it's not completely independent. I think, and Stephen continues, I think this is a very serious and genuine attempt to bypass the legacy programme gatekeepers and get disclosure. The secrecy is under attack on many levels. Skywatcher, documentaries, potential release of files, possible through the audit of the Pentagon, whistleblowers. If this doesn't work, I can only conclude the phenomena itself actively does not want disclosure. Yep. Again, a good point, Stephen. Good point, well made. It's not completely independent of government, so does that taint it? And it will taint it for some, but it's also very understandable. And I like your statement there. The secrecy is under attack on many levels. That is true, and as much as there's so much pushback and disappointment across the board, we probably haven't had this multi-pronged an approach, at least in my lifetime, at official disclosure from the UFO phenomenon. So, yeah, good shout, Stephen. And Legacy Brew Pub says, what's the difference between this and Greer's CE5 experience? They're both groups in large areas claiming to summon UFOs. I'm happy they're not publicly asking for money, but that could just mean they've secured private funding for the time being. For me, this is a story I treat the same way as the Nazca mummies. I don't pay attention to it, and if any update comes across my feed, I'll probably read it. On that Legacy Brewpub post, Stephen from above did post to say, I think the difference is they have the funding, they have the technological experience, they have the government agency cooperation and the legacy programme experience. I can't really answer much more to it than what Stephen said, to be fair. I think he's right that there are big differences. However, it's not to say that it couldn't go a similar way. It will very much be this organisation with Skywatcher. Actions will determine the impact, the legacy, and what it can really provide. And I want to go through some YouTube posts on the same question around Skywatcher before we get to those calls. Jacob says, I have a bad feeling about it. Number one, I don't like how they did a closed door event to some billionaires while so much of their efforts remain in the dark to the public. Number two, I don't like how they keep calling it summoning when it should be more like an invitation for peaceful contact. I'll come back to number two. And number three, I really don't like how it seems they're setting this up to be some sort of bait and retrieval thing, probably for these billionaire investors. They use love and elevated consciousness to bring in craft so they can be captured and dissected, especially if the craft themselves are conscious, which has been suggested by many. Not unfair, that got a few thumbs up on the YouTube post. Number two, we don't know what to call it. Summoning, whatever it may be, but we don't even know what's being summoned. If indeed you could call what we are summoning a craft or an object or an orb, or is it something that's physical? Is it non-physical? We don't know. So we don't know what these things are coming through for. We don't know if we want to summon these things. That's, again, something I'd be interested to hear Skywatcher talk on. And if they have talked about that and I've missed it, I'd love to hear. But if anyone's got any thoughts on that, the actual idea of summoning some of these things being a potential bad idea. And number three, I really don't like how it seems to be there's some sort of bait and retrieval thing. Then surely if it was, these things would be done or known and happen in the background anyway. Not that I'd be saying that's a good thing, but you wouldn't need to make it public. That would be a really strange way to do this. And surely the craft or these objects themselves wouldn't be so gullible, naive or susceptible to appearing to be shot down. I think that would be a really dangerous game, but it's still an interesting point, Jacob, so thank you for that. Psychoactive Podcast says, hey Andy, hope you're well. While I do understand how people might feel about the whole psionics talk as a step too far, scientific ESP research has a history that goes back centuries. The gut reaction from some people was interesting to see. In my case, I actually believe psi abilities have much stronger foundations of being real than ET from another planet. Meanwhile, mystical and shamanistic traditions have existed for millennia with a rich history too. As far as Skywatcher, my main investigation into Dr. Grinberg paints a dark side of a programme that did deal with the ESP, and people like him, Andrea Puharich, Itzhak Bentov, and others have also been part of. I just want to know how much of that history is known by the Skywatcher team. If they are familiar with this history, what are they going to do in order to right all those mysterious wrongs of the past? Psychoactive podcast, not stuff I'm too familiar on, but send me over some information that does sound really interesting. Zachary says, I'm excited that this topic is becoming more widespread. I agree with some of the others that it needs to be conducted with good intentions, and I feel like that's how Jake articulated it. Maybe I misunderstood. I think their intention is to invite a visit and hopefully a close contact visit. NHI are in the driver's seat. At the end of the day, they'll decide how it works out for them. Engage the phenomenon. Woo. Zachary, yeah, maybe it is just that. They're looking to bring one of these things out to show folks and go, here, look, this is what this is. I say worry. I don't worry. I think there's quite a high likelihood, though, that even in a best case scenario, we're not going to get a live streamed news event of one of these objects landing in the desert next to Jake Barber. I think what we're going to get is some interesting data, and it may just be one of those things that if you're entrenched in the UFO topic, you'll know what it's like, where good data for one person isn't the same for someone else, unfortunately. And I wonder if we end up with something like this here. I really don't know. So Lunacy says, it's cute that they think they can trick sentient beings that are smarter than us and can read our minds. Do they not understand the irony of what they're saying? They don't have good intentions, and that will backfire on them. Potentially, but again, there's assumptions there, isn't there? That we are summoning sentient beings with what they are summoning. Who knows what it is? Egan said, the question I'd ask the Skywatcher team is how about how a discovery will lead directly to disclosure, i.e., given disclosure is a transparency or trust issue, what do they think they're going to find out that's different to all the other individual experiences that have happened since the Roswell incident or even Magenta? Is such a claim wise? Good luck to them, and if they're successful, well done being open about it. And I'll just get through some more of these comments, folks, before we head over to the phone lines. Booper says, don't get me wrong, I'm curious as hell, but I'm just not clear on their motivation. Fight for Freedom says, all another smoke and mirrors event to keep us hanging on for an unspecified number of years. I would hope not on this one. I just feel that given what they're looking to do, there has to be something sooner than later from them. Otherwise, it will just fade away. But it does seem they have some serious investment behind them. And this is the stuff that things like the SALT conference isn't a UFO conference, and it's not a UFO exhibition. But what has happened is people like Carl Nell, people like Gary Nolan have gone and been successful and managed to curate interest in the background where organisations and individuals, entrepreneurs, hedge funds, investment people have come forward and put money into this topic, which probably is going to need it to really get a more public disclosure happening. Because let's be fair, folks, different conversation for a different day, but right now, is it looking likely we're going to get that government disclosure with the new administration in the US? No. Just off the back of what's happened recently, off the back of how the drone situation went, no, I think governmental disclosure can go in the back burner. It will have to be private. It will have to be public. It's not going to come from government anytime soon unless something changes there. I just can't see it. Skiboard says, I accept they needed funding or to secure funding, so billionaires, why not? But my concern is their timescales for public disclosure. They already admitted they've brought down craft, so why make the poorer population wait 12 months to see undeniable results? Something seems off. They've not brought down a craft through these methods. If you're referring to Jake Barber and co retrieving craft, we don't know how or why those craft came down, as far as I know. Unless I'm wrong on that one, or indeed where those craft are, or who is in custody of them. So yeah, but maybe it's a case of, who knows? You're right. I wouldn't say something seems off, but there are so many questions around this group, this organisation, like any group. But I am still leaning on the hopeful side for now. Distraction says Jake Barber approved Dopser whistleblower. Skywatcher supported by big money. In contact with Arrow currently. Actually talking about telepathic communication with NHI. Seriously trying to get one to land. Add a new transparency committee. Whatever this is, contains several surprising elements. Naturally, I'm very suspicious, but totally intrigued. Do you know what? That could be a tagline, I think, for a lot of folks who get in touch with me. And I wouldn't say that's unfair to say. I am also naturally very suspicious, but totally intrigued. So yeah. Francis says summoning craft for billionaire investors is as almost as much of a low consciousness move as the military industrial complex doing the same. When will we learn? And Jason Pitts says everything points to it being a grift. Right now, Jason, I don't know, because there would be. I don't know what they're making. I don't know the money coming in, but I think proof is in the pudding, and right now, give them the benefit of the doubt. So yeah, let's see. But listen, folks, the ramble carries on after a short break. You are going to hear from a couple of listeners. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on so far. Thank you to everyone who's got in touch. Please remember, sign up and support the podcast on any of the paid platforms. Very much appreciated. And if you want to get involved in the call-in, email me over ufouapam@gmail.com. Link is in the description for all of those things. Or if you want me to read out your email, send it over and I will get those in as well. So thank you so much. We'll head over to the phone lines. Joining me on the line now, I have Alex in South Hereford, which is in England for those of you outside of the UK. Alex, welcome to the Ramble.
Hi, Andy. Really great to be able to chat to you.
Great to have you on. We've been actually planning this since December.
Yeah,
and how,
kept missing
your
each other.
schedule's busy, my schedule's mildly busy, so it's we've managed to finally get here. But listen, mate, the floor is yours. The Ramble is about the listeners. What we're talking about today.
Yeah, I just try and outline a little bit what came through with the first email I sent you, which was probably quite detailed, but essentially it comes down to sighting I had last year, and it was very. I don't know how to explain it. Well, I'm going to try and explain it. It was essentially not what I was expecting. Um, the reaction to be from it. Where I live. We've got a massive open field at the back of my garden, and it was completely blue sky day. You could see everything, and just happened to be noticing planes crossing over and seeing the condensation trails and going like, oh wow, you can really see them. And yeah, just was in the kitchen, probably doing sorting out some dishes, looking out the window, and I was. It just comes across so typical of like other people's experiences. I was kind of almost like not compelled, but I was like wanted to go outside, and I walked down to the end of the garden and looked up, and I saw a lozenge shaped object way up in the sky, and it had two. If you imagine, it was quite transparent, so it was very high up, like probably upper atmosphere, and either end of the lozenge there was a circle which I could see through to like the background sky, and I was completely transfixed looking at this object, and I knew from hearing, hearing other people's encounters to look. I needed to look down and find another reference point to kind of gauge how high up this thing was. So I thought I'll look down at one of the condensation trails and try and eventually get down to the horizon and look back up again. But in the back of my mind, something was telling me that if I looked away and looked back, this thing would be gone. It was just so clear to me. So it's the same kind of compulsion that led me to go outside was the same compulsion I had to do. I had to look down, try and clock one of the condensation trails or the horizon and look back up. And immediately, as soon as I did it, flipped my eyes down, didn't move my head, flipped my eyes down, back up again, gone. And yeah, I was completely dumbstruck. Immediately took a video and sent to some close friends of mine who we often chat about this kind of stuff in general, and said, "Look, I've just seen this thing," and videoed it and kind of showed the angles and stuff like that. And I went back inside the house and actually drew it. I'm originally studied illustration, so just knocked up a quick sketch, trying to get proportions, the timing, the time and date, obviously, and the kind of atmospheric uh, conditions. The kind of it was all a bit of a shock. It was like, okay, I've seen this thing. What was that? The strangest thing about the whole uh, encounter, it's not really an encounter, but the sighting was what happened a few days later on. I'm not a particularly, well, I'm not religious, um, but just sitting at home, a thought popped into my head out of nowhere. That thing I saw was the device that is used to transfer our souls to the next dimension. I have no idea where that thought has come from, and I would never even begin to think anything like that. And that was just so clear in my head. That's what I saw. Yeah, and it kind of opened up then another feeling later on in the week, that same week, of remembering when I was a child, another sighting I had, which suddenly all came flooding back to me. Yeah, I remember it was around, it must have been around Christmas, because we used to have in the house I grew up in, we had a bay window, and that's where the Christmas tree used to be. And me and my mum decorating the Christmas tree, and then she must have looked through the open curtains because it was at night time, but early enough for me to be awake. So 5 o'clock, in December would be black enough at night. And she just went to the front door, opened the front door, and was standing there. And I looked, and I was like, "Well, the door didn't knock, so what's she doing?" And I went round. I must have been about 6 or 7 years old, and she was looking up straight again above the horizon. She was looking up at something, and I looked up as well, and there was three lights in a row. Sorry, not three, four lights in a row at an angle of like 35 degrees from the horizon, and just drifting up very purposely towards our left, and they just popped out of vision. And I remember saying to her, "What is that?" And her saying, "Oh, it's Father Christmas's sled." Yeah. Every time I spoke to her about it later on in life, like in my kind of early teens, she would just shut down that conversation. I'd say like, "What? Remember that thing that we saw?" Bam. She did not want to talk about it. And yeah, seeing this other thing, whatever that was, and having this feeling of like it's so much bigger than anything else. It's not just some being flying around in a machine.
Mm,
If this thing was the size it looked to be, it was miles across, absolutely massive. Like the best way I've found to describe it as well is when you see the moon in the day and you have that kind of transparency over it.
mm.
It was like that. So that thing that far up, miles across, absolutely massive, and just gone in an instant. Just it's almost like, I wouldn't say it like shot off. It's almost like it just phased out of like me being able to see it. I caught it for a second, like out of the corner of my eye, but not. It was like full on looking at this thing, like bam, and yeah, at the time you're kind of scrambling, like I just saw this thing, but that feeling days later on was accompanied also, sorry, I missed that bit, it was accompanied with the feeling that I will know what this is when I pass away. And then it was like, okay, what does that mean? And then it was like, oh, because that's the device that's used to transfer our souls to the next dimension. Verbatim what the thought was. And I don't want to go as far to say, oh, that was like implanted in my mind, but I can't describe it any other way. Like it's, I know that's what that thing was, and I have no shadow of a doubt in my mind anymore. Like that's what I saw. whatever that is. Yeah.
Do you get the feeling you were meant to see it, that the object was meant to be seen by you or
A
not?
100%. That was another feeling as well, was like, I was meant to see this thing. Again, like, what does that really mean? And yeah, it's only over the last couple of months I've felt like completely no, like, uncomfortableness or like shame about just saying it, like, because I can't explain it. Like, I can't explain the thing that I saw. I cannot explain the feelings I had retroactively about it afterwards. It's like, and yeah, I would just always be interested. I tried to like go through various other sightings and read up on other people who might have experienced anything similar to me in terms of like, have they had these retroactive feelings about it? But definitely the thing about it was what the thing was. It was so typical. Like, I was drawn outside to look at this thing, and I was meant to see it, and it knew that I could see it.
Mhm.
All of those feelings were exactly what it had, and you just hear about them time and time and again. And it was almost like it was cliched.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
You
must be a
get
reason. Like,
yeah, you get these theories that when people talk about the UFO topic being stranger than we can imagine, and the idea that if you take that we have this soul and you have the soul before and after, and this what we call life is just an experience that you either volunteer for, from the great soup of souls, whatever it may be, and you come down here, you have this human experience for whatever reason, and then you go back having had this experience. Is that something you subscribed to before?
I mean, yes, no. I mean, not. I'm gonna say no. It's something, obviously, you're aware of those kind of ideas, but that's a general feeling anyway. I mean, ever
It's
since,
just a theory or it's something that
yeah,
is a
it's
possibility?
something, yeah, but it wasn't something I would be like, oh yeah, that's 100% what's going on. The feeling, I mean, it did genuinely shock me that like I was having this knowing that this is what I'd seen, and like, it was almost a bit creepy, you know. It was not what it's just not what I was expecting at all from having that. And I kind of think back to the experience as a child, and how I don't think my brain was able to, despite being a massive science fiction fan my whole life and blah blah blah, I didn't clock that's what that was as a child. I was seeing this thing. I think my mother did, and I think whatever she experienced afterwards or during was something that she just did not want to engage with,
Mm.
and she was a very open person, and whatever it was that she experienced, I'm guessing, assuming she must have done experienced something similar to me, where she had this afterthought. She was just like, no, 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 shut that down, don't want to know. Because it's like, it's almost, I find it reassuring now, in a way, that like, that if that's what it is, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to suddenly, I think my partner sometimes worries I'm going to end up on a street corner with a sign saying, this is what it is. Da, da, da. It's like,
Yeah.
nah, nah. I just kind of go, okay, that's something. It's a possibility. It doesn't occupy my waking thoughts all the time. Like, every now and again, I go, oh yeah, that was something that happened. Um, but
Are you comfortable then, Alex, though, with that being where you're at with it? It's not something then that's compelled you to look into that more, explore it more. Obviously, you're at the point you're sharing it here, which is
mm,
wonderful. And I no doubt there will be people listening having similar thoughts or
yeah,
experiences. There will be people listening thinking, this sounds utter nonsense. I can't buy into that. Because that's the nature of this topic,
yeah,
and unless some of these things, unless you experience them yourselves,
mm.
it can be difficult to comprehend or process, or it's just not what you make of this topic. But do you think it's just something that you're happy to keep in isolation? It's an event, a sighting, it happened, and it's perhaps not transformed your life in any way, but it's just there.
Yeah, I think it's. I really hope there is other people who have experienced something similar to me, and I found it hard to talk about it, because it was this is wacky now. Like even though I'm massively into this kind of stuff, this is like, is this too far? And then it's kind of now like, I hope other people hear this and go, "Ah, right, okay, that was what it was. I did experience that, and it's fine. It's fine." I think it just it reaffirmed the notion that, like, this is way bigger than we can comprehend. I'm a fan of, was very happy when you had Dr. Madden on, because I'm a
Mm.
big fan of his thought process about this whole thing. That the whole the construct of this is, we see glimpses of it and we go, okay, that's what this is, but we the average person could never get their head around the whole thing, because we're not supposed to, essentially. There's probably a whole mechanism and hierarchy, and I don't want to say government, but almost like a governmental process that might be going on with this whole thing, that we have no clue. And even if we was shown everything, like, oh, here you go, this is how reality works, be like, what? Oh,
Mm.
no idea, sorry. And I would like to hope, if some stuff was able to come out more over the next couple of years, decades, um, and I do think we are being drip fed in a way, this whole process, to get a certain number of people used to these ideas, and then that will just happen. The average person on the street doesn't understand quantum mechanics. They don't understand the fabric of space time, or how any of this is working. That's fine, because they're going about their daily lives and work. But there are some people who have a passing interest in it and understand a little bit, and there are some other people who study it and actually, bring forward more ideas around these concepts. So I think that's what will happen eventually with this whole topic, is that some people have a baseline understanding of, like, oh yeah, we know this thing exists. Do I have any interest in it? No. There are some people who do take an interest in it, and some people who eventually, who are already studying it,
Yeah.
but allowed to just get on with it. And
To be
yeah,
fair, Alex, I think your average person on the street doesn't understand how the movie Inception works. So, you know, that's no doubt there will be people listening to this going, "Yeah, that's me." So apologies if
yeah.
that's hit you hard, but email me and I'll explain it to you. It's not difficult.
No.
But here's a bit of a brain dump for you. So I just spoke to Diana Pasulka yesterday,
Yes.
and we were talking about the Jake Barber Skywatcher group, which is dividing opinion.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of folks really excited to see what they might bring out, and I've seen other folks refer to it disparagingly as
Mm.
Skywatcher Ranch, giving it a little bit of Skinwalker
Yeah, yeah,
Ranchy
yeah.
type vibes and stuff, and they're being dismissive of it. And I think all is fair at the moment until anything is on the table. But obviously, the big call out from these folks involved are that they can summon potentially. And I said to Diana, they can summon a craft. What's your opinion on that? And she said, well, let's call it a craft, but we don't know what these are. And what if, let's
Yeah.
just use your experience and your thoughts, and what if it's akin to, using a Ouija board and
Mm.
breaking through to whatever the afterlife is, and contacting something else or some other realm or plane, spiritual plane. Um, and when you use quote unquote psionics or CE5, you're kind of using whatever your soul is, or that consciousness, to reach out to that other side.
Mm.
And maybe you're not seeing a craft like Diana says. Maybe you're almost touching the afterlife. I know that goes way into the deep
Yeah.
end or off the reservation, but perhaps that's an element of it. And you know what? You can't summon a craft and bring it down to sit next to you, but you can just bring whatever this thing is into our kind of realm of existence for a moment, to be like, there's a connection there,
Yeah.
and maybe that's all it is.
I mean, yeah, I was very interested in Diana's work from the get go, really, because it was like there's such a different angle, but it makes so much sense. And that's what I think that's the only thing I could link back to say what I experienced. The grounding might have come from a bit of that, where it's like,
Hmm.
it has these links going back thousands of years, and that's how we built religion around this thing to understand what it was. But it's this kind of fleeting moment all the time, and again goes back to the control mechanism from
Mm,
from
yeah.
from valet, and it's always just the edge, the edge of our reality, and it could be collectively, a large enough amount of people across the planet all decided we want to will this into existence.
Yeah.
That that's another thing that I do think about since, and is like is it's kind of we're transforming what would have been the major religion's faith into this new belief system to then move forward to something else. But I'm still on the fence about Barber. I find it so, and that's so weird because of all the stuff that we've been through and heard from and blah blah blah. To then have this guy come along and say, yeah, I've done it.
Well,
You know,
that's actually what I
yeah,
want to
it's
finish.
like, yeah,
That's what I want to finish on, because
yeah,
I've got, as part of this ramble, I've gone through and asked people online and on the Discord or on X, what are your thoughts on this Skywatcher group and what's claiming what it can achieve? What do you
yeah.
think is the kind of, what's the likelihood, but what's the kind of best case scenario for you?
Oh my word! You just want to see. I found it interesting that Grush is involved. That this recent thing, and it's like, ah, are we just gonna? Is it one of these things where we see what we want to see, or is it going to be something that's like, okay, you can't deny that, like, but then we've had this again and again. Is it always just going to be this? They're just slicing off more people to the you can't deny that camp until it just tips over, and the consensus is you cannot deny this anymore, whatever
Hmm.
way, whatever shape or form that takes. But again, yeah, heavy heavy fence sitting for me, because it's like,
My issue with it is, and I'm going to argue my own argument here. I think that
mhm,
there's an element of, well, if you can summon even one of these things to appear in the sky, you
mm,
know, get an News Nation is the network right now, which is a burgeoning network. It's not one of the major networks, but it's
yeah,
it's gaining traction from what I can see, and it gets a lot of hits on its UFO stories, particularly through Ross Coulthart. Get a camera out there and live stream it.
yeah,
Here we
yeah,
are with Jake Barber,
yeah,
Skywatcher, and we're going to see them use psionics and summon one of these craft.
mm,
Now, that will get people's attention, but then you have a moment that you can win people over by doing it,
yeah.
or you don't win them over because it doesn't happen. But then would there be an argument of that's not how it works? Which I suppose, like your story, Alex, like so many
Yeah,
other folks like mine, right now, give me the evidence of it.
yeah, 100%. And like it, I'm gonna. My brother-in-law is, and very similar to you in terms of like, there's no footage that would
Mm,
convince me, because he always argues the point, like in the age of AI the way it is now. I mean, how much has moved on even in like the last year is not out of control, but it's quite shocking sometimes. So we can't rely on that anymore. So what can we rely on? Okay, first-hand witness, like statements, and there. But then again, that's just you trusting me that I've said this thing. Unless you experience it, you don't know.
Do you know the other issue with the Skywatcher stuff? And this probably goes in their favor. And this would get a little bit, I suppose, apologist for keeping this a secret. If they are in an area, which it sounds like, where there's a no-fly zone
Mm,
and you can't just take anyone out to it, and it's a military or private contractor area, then you can't just take a news crew out.
Yeah.
But then also, does that start to raise the question? People may look at that skeptically and go, well, yeah, nonsense. You can't prove it. You're just making, you're putting up barriers. But is there then a reason that in certain places, these things are more
Yep.
likely to be summoned or appear? And that's why you have these huge areas cordoned off by the military.
Literally going to say, pardon the pun, but it's chicken and egg.
Yep.
Did they set those places up because these things are happening, or exactly were they like, or were these things coming there because they set those places up?
Yep.
It's all, again, it's like managed. It's just the management.
Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams. If you build it,
Yeah,
they will
man.
come. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of it that way around as well. Yeah, it's like so. Yeah, and that just links back into giving more credence towards a team of people being set up to do these things. Like, yeah, and I think it I think they can only go along so much more before a large amount of people are going to go, that's enough. Like, literally, you have to admit to it, or just give us something, give us some vague little snippet, and just go, there you go, and that will just shut down a large amount of people. But then the real stuff is going to carry on.
Do not discount people's stubbornness, willful ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. They're happy to not know. I think on mass. And again, it's one of those, I've talked about this before, and we'll kind of finish up here. If you asked even like the most hardened people interested in this subject, the folks who bang on about, yeah, I just want to know everything. I bet if you took those people one at a time into a room and you said to them, I can tell you everything that we know about the UFO topic, even the really scary stuff. But afterwards, you can take this pill and forget it all. I wonder, and I think a large percentage of folks would take the pill and be like, I wish I didn't know that.
I think I've often thought about that kind of a similar kind of scenario, and I think I don't know. I think I might be one of them as well, because it'd be like,
I would be the same, mate.
yeah,
I'm not going to sit here and go, yeah, I would know everything and be quite happy to go, yeah, that's great. I know. It would probably be terrifying,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it would shake you to the point of, am I better just not knowing that? You're in the Matrix, plug me back in.
yep,
I want to eat the steak,
yep,
I just want
100%.
to, a Cypher, it was the dude, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Who goes to the restaurant, ignorance is bliss, yep, plug me back in. I don't want to know,
yeah,
make me rich, and I'll happily live out this existence on whatever kind of boat you want to buy me. But yeah, listen, Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the pod today. I'd love to
That's
get you
fine.
back on as well. What I would like
Amazing, yeah.
is, do you still have the drawing of the object?
Yes, I do. I found it was knocking about the other day, actually.
Can you
I
send me a little
will,
picture of that?
yes, I'll get that for you, mate. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I will try and stick it on the thumbnail for this episode.
I might, because I was going to do like a nicer one. I might,
Go with the
update.
original.
I'll go with the original. It was done
Yeah.
then, but yeah. Okay, go on then.
What I don't want is some Disneyfied drawing now,
Yeah.
beautiful illustration, coloured in,
It was
signed with your business address in the
no, man.
bottom,
Yeah. It's like, here you go. Cool now.
Go with the original, that's always the
Yeah, man.
best.
Yeah. I will do. I'll do that for you, Andy.
Otherwise, you're doing what George Lucas done to Star Wars. So yeah, there we go.
No, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, don't be George Lucas.
No.
Right. Thanks very much, Alex. Nice speaking to
Nice
you.
one, dude. Yeah.
Joining me now on the line, I've got Ben all the way out in Ireland. Ben, welcome.
Hi, Andy. What's up?
I am good. And warning, folks, you have a Scotsman and an Irishman. We are 2/3 of the way into a really good joke. Best of luck.
If both of us walk into a bar, you're in trouble.
Yeah, good chance as well. So, but listen, you're in a friendly bar here. Let's put it that way. What is it you want to talk about today? The floor is yours, Ben.
Honestly, I wanted to talk on abductions because it seems like that's coming up a lot recently from John Blish, from everybody. Just seems to have a little bit of an abduction angle recently. Even Jacques Vallée recently talking about his own experience. It's coming up in different ways to me, and I just wanted to see where people are at, because last week or the week before, or time flies, was the abduction kind of segment, and it just kind of spurred on a lot of stuff. And I just wanted to have a kind of a breakdown on it and see what's going on in the world of abductions, because people seem to stray far away from it most of the time. Not nowadays.
It's really strange because it's one of those things people get in touch with, or I see online, and the comments are, "Why don't abductions happen anymore?" And it's almost like
Yeah,
it's like an old school 70s, 80s, 90s thing that happened with UFOs and it just stopped. But I don't think that is the case. And for me, it seems to be that it's perhaps as the conversation has, I don't know if evolved is a fair word, but changed and got a little bit more
mm,
scientific and a little bit more political. There's just been certain aspects of the conversation that have had to be pulled back on. And I think abductions has just been one of them.
yeah. Honestly, it's because it got a bad rap, abductions, from people who claim to be abducted and all these different kind of angles that people took on it, and it was portrayed very often in media too. So you kind of get that, like, oh, it's slightly comedic, oh, it's slightly fictional. And when people think of abductions, they think of a big flying saucer with a big beam coming down and hovering you up in a green light. And it just makes it all comical to people. But then there's the very serious side of abductions, like even looking at Terry Lovelace, where he's got implants in his legs, supposedly.
Mm.
These little tiny things, little, oh, what was it? It's like it was, the doctor said it was like not bone marrow or something, but it had a weird density in it, the little flower arrangements. It's like where you start looking at it and going, oh, what's actually going on here? Because in Lovelace's case, he was a Vermont lawyer, like a prosecutor for the state. He's not the sort of
Yeah,
person to
yeah.
come out and go, oh yeah, like this is weird thing happened to me years ago for fun. He didn't seem like the type anyway. So it's
It's an odd thing to make up at that level as well. And
very much
you
so.
talk about like the Whitley Strieber's obviously one of the classic cases that people know about because of how well Whitley wrote about his experience. But then very
Mm.
quickly, South Park's first episode is Cartman gets an anal probe, which is it's joking about Whitley Strieber's abduction experience, the beings, and it's you're talking about something like you say that's really serious, and Whitley talks about essentially being raped and sodomized, and it
Literally.
seems to be. I've talked about this with a few guests, and it's one of the last things in our society as it teeters on the brink of whatever collapse, destruction, whatever we're doing, where you're not allowed to joke about anything anymore. Not that you should joke about certain things, but that seems to be rape is a big no-no as a joke. However, as if someone comes out and says it was a UFO experience, then that seems still to be publicly folk go, oh, they've got issues. Yeah, that's nonsense. So there's still that huge
100%.
stigma or barrier up to it, and I can see why for example, the Sol Foundation, one of the talking points from was it the recent one or the year before? I can't remember. Where Whitley Strieber attended
Oh,
and was meant to talk, but basically
I
they
think it
they
was the year
decided to
before,
stay
but
away.
yeah,
They stayed away from
yeah.
it, and I can understand why at this point. And we had this chat. I had this chat with Kelly Chase recently as
Mm,
well around the whole experiencer thing. I think there are platforms for those conversations. I am more than happy to host people to chat about those kind of things. Who am I to judge them? I'll take these things at face value. But I do understand where, from a mainstream point of view, there are so many aspects of the conversation right now that you just have to leave. And I use the example. This is probably going out a few weeks after we record this, mate. But last
mm,
week, so early February, I was on a podcast with two friends, and their podcast is pop culture, social stuff, having a bit of a laugh. But they wanted a catch up on UFOs. Neither of them particularly believe. One of them's far
okay.
more skeptical than the other. And I sent them the Jake Barber News Nation piece, which they basically, when we talked about it, they were like, it was interesting enough for the first 10 minutes hearing about this guy who retrieved a UFO, some red flags around just that whole idea. But as soon as he mentioned his experience, a divine femininity, the emotion of it, they were like, nah, psionics, no, total red flags for them.
Yeah.
For them, it was the tap out moment came quite early on. And I thought that's your general public. So again, when folks online are like, everyone's ready for this conversation, no, you can't categorically say that because everyone is not ready. At least there's two guys who are sitting there
100%.
going, nah, not a chance. And they don't care about credibility, military backgrounds, how well people speak, what they're saying, when they're saying it. For them, just the idea of UFOs being picked up and retrieved is starting to waver their their interest. Psionics, all that kind of stuff, telepathy, experiences, no, for them, total nonsense. And it's a
This is
difficult one.
it. It's very difficult because it's the general woo that people talk about all of this side of stuff, but where it kind of blends into getting into parascience and all these different kind of like avenues. But even for the Jake Barber interview, I showed my mother the same interview. She's kind of vague interest in UFO. She kind of listens to me shite on about it more than anything. But she had a listen, and she actually, at the part where he starts talking about his religious style experience with a goddess and so she was interested. But even as somebody who has an interest in the spiritual side and does Reiki classes and things like that, still didn't really grab her enough to go, oh yeah, I believe him, despite the background, despite all this stuff. And for people in the UFO community who are latching on to people who say these sort of things in different ways, whereas Barbara might come out and say, oh, this is a religious experience, and people say, oh, that's good, I now have confirmation. It's becoming very intertwined and kind of very scary to say, oh, this is an abduction or this isn't an abduction, because people take it in very strange ways when you start describing it. Either they can jump at you or they can start jumping for you, and it's getting even my own experience. I don't know what happened in my own personal experience, but if I start latching onto someone and some ideal or some avenue of thought, like I'd say it's a religious thing, then I can easily be led very astray into some weird worlds. And it's scary. It's scary to try find confirmation of something and have 50 people tell you different answers, and then the other 50 people say that you're a nutcase and you're medically unable and you need help. And where does anybody come out nowadays with that?
Are you comfortable talking about any of your own experience?
Yeah. Like for me, it's weird because this kind of was spurred off by finding the info in a different like podcast or a book or something. But I had experiences first as a kid with the Hat Man, which I didn't know was a thing, a shared experience until kind of recently-ish, maybe a few years ago. And I was like, that's its own kind of entity, shadow people and all these things. I kind of did a bit of research. I was like, yeah, cool, okay, that's its own thing. But then I'm only recently started reading Terry Lovelace's incident in Devil's Den. And his experience in his room with his nightmares and his childhood experiences they really struck a vibe with me. It was him being grabbed by many hands. And that was what really got me, because in my Hatman nightmares, which do you call them nightmares? Are they nightmares? I don't know. But taking it that way, if my Hatman nightmares were those things and they mirror Terry Lovelace's incident, and then the rest of my life was followed by seeing weird UFOs and having weird experiences, if I was to sum it all up, it looks like a summary of Terry's own fucking life. Yep. But then do I start going, oh, okay, well, that's obviously an abduction then. Oh, I was obviously abducted. Like, oh, yeah, you can easily connect the dots, but it's dangerous to start doing it and start making assumptions. And that's where I'm in the case nowadays, looking at John Blish, say, oh, well, the abduction scenario is the real reason for the secrecy. And that's genuinely, that's the scariest possible outcome. Like, I can't think of anything scarier than, oh, they do actually come down and take us and have full control. We can do nothing about it. That sounds awful. But what other avenue can you take it at the moment? Because so many people are coming at so many different weird kind of thoughts on it. And my own experience adding up that way, how do I reconcile that? I don't know if that made sense, though, but did
No, it does. Like, even with those kind of experiences, do you have a red line of what you're willing to go into in terms of a UFO conversation, and what you're willing to consume, whether it's on a podcast, a book? Is there something you read and go, for me, that's the line? Anything over
kind
that?
of, yeah. I didn't think I did, but I kind of do, yeah. Like, the second it starts getting into Jesus, that's okay, fair enough. That's one angle I've seen people go on, is where these sort of visitations are angels and stuff like that. Like, okay, fair enough, but it's not my base of knowledge, so I don't generally go that way. But I can go with psionics, and I can kind of run with that sort of thing in now modern times. But I'm somebody in this community, so does that have much value in that sense? I believe all that stuff anyway, in that kind of general sense. I have a little bit of faith in it. It's hard to say there's a literal cutoff, but when it starts getting into the kind of mystical, I don't even know how to describe it, that kind of where it's really pseudoscience. It really is just like, oh, you have to believe with all your heart that this is the truth to really make it happen. It's like, okay, like I'll put it this way: I think CE5 probably has something to it in that sense, where maybe you can spiritually, physically reach out with a soul, or the same way remote viewing works. Maybe that sort of stuff seems to be real, and I believe that. But anything beyond that, where you maybe like try and influence people through your mind, or the quantum field of mental thoughts of the world, and all these sort of concepts, there, I start getting lost on that. I'm not 100%, and that's like I'm an experiencer and a believer, and all these things, and I'm still lost on that. So I can only imagine how the general public, as you say, would react to that big fact.
Yeah, I even when it comes to abductions, it's funny. I have an easier time believing the horrible ones than I do the positive ones. The idea that someone would be taken on board a craft and experimented on, I can believe more than someone being taken on board a craft, flown to another galaxy, or taken to some other dimension and shown all these wonderful planets. And I start to go,
Yeah.
really, that for me seems a real stretch, because I suppose it's almost a hierarchy thing where I could believe a more intelligent species, or even a species that sees itself as above us, which they probably are, literally and figuratively, and they're where they are as a species. They would experiment on us because it's what we as a species have done on this planet, not only to animals but to other humans, and that still goes on now, and it's disgusting. But then the idea that, Ben, no offense, but you get picked up in the middle of a field one day out in Ireland having a nice sunny walk, and you're taking to a far off galaxy, and who is Ben? Why are you special to be shown this other race's planet? That doesn't make sense to me, but it does make sense, the
Yeah.
horrible. Maybe that's a human thing for me and my kind of bias. It's not right, but it's not
No, I
wrong.
totally
It's
get
just,
you. I totally get you. Betty Hill's case of where she does her hypnosis, and then
yeah,
she starts getting, it was I do a star map, and they're from Zeta Reticuli and all this sort of
yeah.
stuff. I might be conflating that with another case, but
No,
I
no.
think that's what it is. But with Betty and Barney, I can listen to the hypnosis tapes they had and be genuinely start really feeling that sounds real. But then those sort of details, you're exactly right. Those details where like they're telling Betty, "Oh, here's where we're from. We're just having like just a casual telepathic chat on the ship with the people who abducted you. Like, yeah, hi, what's up? Oh, it's nice to meet you."
Yeah.
That really does lose me, and it sounds silly and it is biased, but it's very hard to follow along believably from there, because you kind of go, again, who is Betty Hill to these people? Why does she get to be shown all these things in space and get told about the future and all this stuff?
Yeah.
Not that I don't believe her, but it's hard as just a person to go, yeah, that sounds 100% truthful, because it doesn't make, like I say, I don't think a species above us in that sense really gives that much of a shit. Why do they care that much? I don't think they
Yeah.
would, to sit for memories afterwards. Sounds like a waste of time for a very pragmatic sounding species.
Yeah, I've
If
really
they're
come
that way,
away. Yeah, I've really come away from any one person needing, I suppose, in a way to be 100% correct, accurate, potentially even truthful. And I don't just mean someone's out and out lying, but for example, I've said before, I believe Chris Bledsoe did have an experience, but I also believe that last week he filmed the space station flying past the moon. So
Yeah.
because people coordinated, he lives here, the space station at that time was flying past the moon. Chris Bledsoe has put a video up of a light flying past the moon. And does that detract from Chris Bledsoe's story? For some people it will. However, I believe he still had an initial experience. I think from there you have to kind of discern yourself at what point at what point do you kind of cut off? Where is your red line with each individual's kind of story and take and
Yeah.
narrative? People's narratives can change themselves, their opinions, what someone believes as opposed to what they know. That can, over time, especially over decades, that can bleed into being something similar. I think we've all done it. I've got memories at school of scoring goals, playing football with my mates during my lunch break. But the way I remember it isn't necessarily as far out as it was and as good as it was. Actually, did that one go in or did I miss? I remember it going in. These things start to bleed into all kind of different ways, just the way memory works. And I could well believe if a subject as crazy and wild as this can swing, that happens with individuals and entities. So that's where I'm always happy for folks to say, you know, I've always said, listen to everyone's kind of story, listen to their opinion, listen to narratives, but you have to make up your own mind as to where you sit. And I want to ask you, Ben, how do you see a way to get the abduction conversation or experiencer conversation into the mainstream, which doesn't turn people off?
Oh, that's a bloody hard one, honestly. It's um, at the moment it's hard to approach it for most people, even in the UFO community. So I don't really know a perfect way to start making it normal, to normalize it and make it sound like it's a legitimate, constant thing. It's a very scary prospect for most people, myself included. I don't really on it. I don't know if I want to know that it's completely confirmed, but I don't really see another way to get people to talk about the topic, whether they believe it or not. They kind of go off when people start saying, "Oh, I was abducted," or "I spoke to aliens." Even John Blish is one where he's very well credentialed, and he's saying, "Oh, I met some guy in a van in a big truck in the middle of a forest." It's like that sounds very strange, and it mirrors a lot of cases. But is it going to move a needle forward for people to the point that they go, "Okay, well, this is definitely real," if even he is still not believed, or Lovelace isn't believed, and all this? So I don't really know. I honestly don't know what would make the abduction phenomenon become something that could be commonly talked about, casually talked about in that sense.
Do you think then it's got to be a slow build to it still? Because it's a bit like building a house, but trying to start with the roof before you've built the foundation. You
I
know,
think so. Yeah, it's a good put it. It might be a case that you really have to reconfirm that there is a phenomenon here for people, very black and white, where before you can start talking about what the phenomenon does.
yeah. I want to ask you
Mm.
just a final question, Ben, before we wrap up, because you've taken up too much of my time now. No, I'm joking. Before we wrap up, how do you foresee 2025 playing out? Because already we have had whistleblowers coming forward, videos of eggs on the news. We've got Jake Barber's Skywatcher organization about to drop
Yeah.
data. Apparently, by the time this goes out, that may even have come out. We have Age of
Okay.
Disclosure documentary on the horizon, which people are claiming is going to move the needle. We've got a task force which is out there to try and break open 9/11, COVID, the Epstein files, Martin Luther King, JFK, the Bin Laden killing, and UFOs.
People at home won't be able to see me rolling my eyes at that one, I will be honest. But yeah, honestly, 2025 looks absolutely chaotic. I don't know how you're going to keep up with it, man, honest to God, because it looks like there's about 10 different angles that people are coming from in different camps for different types of disclosure. And it's really hard to keep up with. You've got people, you've got like the Age of Disclosure for one. Looks like it's the biggest star-studded cast for the entire UFO community. You've got Jay Stratton coming out and saying, "I've seen this, that, this, and that." But then Skywatch is going to do it on its own. But then Trump's government's going to do it on its own, which are laughable at the moment. But we'll see how it all goes. I don't know. I haven't a clue where any of this might end up. But you can see my belief in certain angles here. But I don't know. Honest to God, I think by the end of the year we're going to have something, but I don't know whether everybody's going to be unified on it.
No, I don't think people would be unified anyway, because even if we
Nah.
get some kind of official disclosure, I think there will be lots of different camps. And I just spoke today with Jacques Vallée about this literally minutes ago, where even he said disclosure might not be what we think. And he believes disclosure will fracture people. And I could totally believe that you would have people who are all welcoming, and I for one welcome our new overlords. You've then got you've then got folks who are going to treat it religiously and will either accept them as gods. You will have people who will go down the line of these are demons, these are demonic entities, we shouldn't be entertaining this. I think you'll have folks who will go full blown conspiracy. This is a big government psyop, and even though these things are walking about the White House lawn, these aren't real. It's blue beam. I think it would be so fractured and splintered depending on what happens. Do you know what I think would be a pretty cool scenario? Would be imagine actually. Then I think of it. No, maybe it would be cool. You can literally see my thoughts playing out in my head.
Yeah.
If we got like a mass sighting a la the Phoenix Lights, but a really, really good one, that people were like, wow, some kind of craft appears in the sky for a period of time and goes. And imagine that was it for however long. And we literally have years of chewing through this thing just appeared.
Mm.
I often think, imagine, and again, I'm going to ramble a little bit here, but that's the point of this.
That's
Imagine,
it's called the listener ramble.
yeah, exactly. That's the point. Yeah, this is about to be Andy's ramble.
True.
Ben's just getting it in his ear. So imagine all these things that we have happening now tend to be reconnaissance or observations, and these things come and go, and it's been different phenomena, but repeating, coming back and checking on us. What if something out there, and I don't even mean this whole something's coming in 2027 nonsense,
Oh,
right?
stop.
But imagine that there was a craft that just happened to be passing by, nothing to do with us. It wasn't on its way here, but literally it was so big in the sky, you saw it pass by over the course of an evening that
Yeah.
you could see it in the night sky, and that was it, just on its way. Could be a tourist bus from Zeta Reticuli, whatever it is, you know. But it's up there, and it's
Whatever works.
undeniable. Oh my God, there's something. And scientists come out and say on the TV it was actually 220,000 miles from us, but it was so large. We saw it in the sky, an Oumuamua type thing, but we know it's a craft.
Yeah.
But it's gone. It's now heading off in whatever direction. Doesn't interact with us. It just gets seen. What would that do to humanity? There is a form of confirmation without even needing disclosure.
Confirmation without contact. Yeah, it's. I think that might actually be a really good thing for the entire scene, for the planet, really, in that sense. But let's not get too airy fairy here.
Passive confirmation, passive disclosure, when it's like,
there
it is. It just, okay,
yep. I suppose the cat's out of the bag now. He's flown past us. It sounds about right. It'd be the same as if just by chance a thylacine, the Tasmanian tigers just ran past somebody in the middle of Tasmania. Like, I guess they're still alive. You kind of you end the discussion there, whether you capture it or not, whether it's coming towards you or not. You can kind of prove it there. Okay, well, they are alive. But it's the same situation where people would just have to suddenly, I guess it is there, and we'll get 5 million different photos through telescopes and cameras and James Webb and all these different things might be able to interact and give us really solid, honest to God proof that it is something out there without it being the big scary Independence Day ships flying over the White House and blowing it all up. Like, it doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be, the reptilians uncloak in Parliament and they start telling everybody, yes, we're here to be your overlords. None of this has to be the real way. I think a big spaceship going past us, a Oumuamua style, where we can really get measurements, we can really look at it, and the whole planet can see the bloody thing, would really set this topic actually into the public conscious in a good way. No longer, we're waiting on something to hit us. None of this fear. The fear is the worst.
I'll see if I can coin that phrase, passive disclosure. Someone's going to get in touch and say, actually, researcher in 1974 said the UFO almanac. Yeah, but okay, but Ben, pleasure talking to you, mate. Very good to have you on. And obviously, it's nice we converse offline, don't we? You're part of the Discord channel.
It's got to be part of the community, man. Honestly, it's nice to talk to you too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully get you back on again.
Cheers. I'd love to.
That is all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. Apple and Spotify do make a huge difference to the algorithm. If you're checking the show out on YouTube, please don't forget to like and leave a comment on here as well. Any sharing you do is very much appreciated on any social media platform. And finally, you can listen to shows ad-free and sponsor-free in their glorious full versions by subscribing for less than the price of a coffee on Apple, Spotify, just search That UFO Podcast Premium. YouTube, you can sign up and be a member, or you can do that through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his